Good day. I am so excited to have this conversation with Tawa Mitchell for this next installation of Black and Bold Perspectives on Leadership. Tawa, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to learn more about you and hear about your experiences navigating philanthropy and life in general. And so my first question for you is to just give our audience a little bit of flavor about your current role.
Okay, well, my current role is as a senior program officer on the Chicago Commitment Team at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. So that means that I have responsibility for grant making alongside my colleagues in Chicago and our region.
Wonderful. And MacArthur would be the home of the Genius Awards that I hear about so often.
Yes. So we actually refer to them as the Fellows or the Fellows Program, but everybody knows them as the Geniuses. So the Geniuses they shall be. But that is a very wonderful and exciting team that sadly I'm not on, but it's always a wonderful time of year to meet the individuals that inspire and create for us and think for us, and just a wide range of creative, inspiring, motivating, brilliant people. So it's wonderful that the foundation lifts them up, amplifies their work, and really I think many of them, once they get that designation, it is for them a way to attract other wonderful things to their lives and their career. So it's great for us and it's great for them.
That sounds awesome. So your role sounds exciting and interesting, and I'm sure that you had plenty of experiences before you joined the team at MacArthur Foundation. If there was a soundtrack of greatest hits related to your career, what songs would make the list?
Oh, well, first of all, I have to give honor and praise to Prince, the greatest musician of all time. And I would I don't know where I would be without his music and creative genius and inspiration as sort of like the soundtrack to my life. So it's funny that you say that, because I'm like, oh, well, this should naturally be like a Prince song. But maybe Sometimes It Snows in April it is one song that comes to mind, just because it evokes so many beautiful memories. The song is just so well written, but also it evokes this notion that unexpected things happen, and sometimes you feel bad about it, and sometimes those things can ultimately transition into something beautiful and wonderful. And I spent 13 years in city government working on education policy, and really had a wonderful career doing what I love. I think that education is, it's been said many times, but is the civil rights issue of our day, in terms of public education, ensuring that all people have the right to it, to high quality education, that we have educators that look like us, that we have curriculum that's centered around those people that are benefiting from the public education system. And while I didn't always get to work on exactly the things that, I was passionate about every day, I was passionate about young people learning, and teachers having an appropriate working environment, and school leaders being supported in their buildings to do the jobs that they needed to do. And I tried to use my roles, however small or not that they were, to influence that change and bring about that change. And so when I came to MacArthur, it was actually to work as an education program officer, and then our strategy shifted, and education exited at my foundation, and I ended up transitioning to this team that I'm on now, which didn't exist at the time. And so you just never know where life will take you, what kinds of things, maybe it's a sign of the times, but one has to still bring that passion and commitment. And I think just know, at least for me, if I'm on the side of good, I feel like I can be fulfilled and get things done. So.
So it sounds like the work that you've done in city government and related to education, and your, I guess, thinking that education is like the civil rights issue of our day, makes me think that you're really values-based in your leadership, as it relates to how you show up in the work that you're doing. You've mentioned whether the job is big or small, that like either way, Tawa is going to have an impact and leave her fingerprint. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us about a time when your values were in tension, in a work environment or on a project, and how you reconciled that tension or not.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the ways that has happened a couple of times with regard to the school system, one has been the controversial decision to close underperforming schools within the Chicago public school system. And while I was never in a position to sign the edict or make that mandate, I was certainly on either in the mayor's office or at Chicago Public Schools at the time when we were making difficult decisions to close underperforming schools. And I think a lot has been written about the impact of those decisions, the impact in those communities, about what school closures meant. And that was a very difficult time, because I am not at this moment a parent, and I can't speak from that perspective of what it would be like to parent a child in a closing school, especially if I had been a student at that school myself, or if my mother had gone to that school, and sort of generations of people having matriculated at a place that they didn't consider failing, or it did not, on the one hand, it was a building and a set of people, and that meant something to them, important in their lives. And that was very challenging and heart-wrenching to hear stories of how a closure could disrupt a community in that way. On the other hand, I have to believe, and I do believe, that everybody deserves a high quality education. Everybody deserves to attend a school with the resources, with the instructors, with the tools that some of us have taken for granted in our lives. And are we servicing families and students and teachers and school leaders, quite frankly, well, by having them in a place that is not meeting anyone's needs, really, and for teaching and learning, I should say. And that was a really challenging tension to sit within. But at the end of the day, my focus was on the resources in the event that these buildings should close. How can we support families? How can we communicate to them about these changes? How can we ensure that what they want to see in a school is reflected in the places where they may go ultimately? And so that gave me purpose and made me feel good, at least about my role and what could be possible. If this decision is inevitable, then how do we make it less harmful which, as we know, policies can tend to do. And, you know, there's still a mixed bag on that, right? Like, I'm not as close to the day-to-day issues of public education as I once was, but it is clear in my city when I look around, that the jury's still out on the ultimate long-term impact on these massive school closures within our district and the families, and where they ended up. Yeah, so.
Interesting. I'm having so many flashbacks. My work after graduate school started at Leadership for Quality Education's Charter School Resource Center back in 2002. And it was around the time that we were working to lift the cap on the number of charter schools in the city, et cetera. And I often rewind the tape on just how much my thinking has evolved around the notion of school choice and school closures and education reform in general.
Yeah.
And just what that all entails. Because I certainly wasn't applying like a racial equity or racial justice lens to any of the ed reform work I was doing some decades ago. I guess it's been about 18 years now, maybe. And so it's eye-opening.
It is. It is. And, you know, I just happened to be speaking to a group of students at my graduate school alma mater yesterday, and reflecting on, you know, career choice and arc and some of those things. And I think that, and this may sound trite to say, but if we had listened more and built in more time, like, these processes never allow for that, right? Like, I mean, even if you think about like the transformation of public housing or these large scale sweeping policy changes and reforms, be it education or housing, or pick a policy area that disproportionately affects like Black folks or Latinx folks or people of color in general. And, you know, if you think about the story of public housing and when it was built and when it was then demolished in Chicago, and who sat at those tables and who was on both sides of those coins at the time. And in all instances, yes, there were community processes and you had a listening session or conversation here or there, you know, to check the box along the way. But, you know, what would happen if we built in sustained feedback loops and community engagement and open voice? Like, now it's commonplace to have like a director of community engagement or a DEI chief or something of that nature, like embedded in these large systems, right? But they are often the cleanup woman, speaking of another song, you know, as opposed to like, you know, this open and sustained and two-way kind of communication loop. And we're guilty of that in philanthropy. We're guilty of it in all kinds of sectors. And that, I think, is really challenging when you try, like, everything can't be like, let's take 85 years realistically to enact a policy. None of us would get anything done. But if there was something that said that this was more of a sustained practice rather than one that we pulled the lever on when we had a big thing, right, that we were trying to get done. And I don't know, like one of the things, speaking of a racial equity lens, that we often talk about as a white supremacist value is this notion of time and being in a rush, like being always like so, you know, go, that you don't give yourself the grace or the time or the energy to really proceed in a way that respects everybody's humanity, like when it comes to these things, because we are often operating from a scarcity mindset, and one that says that we don't have time, we don't have money, we can't do this, we can't do that. as opposed to this other frame, as my colleagues would say about abundance, right? And what if, like, we imagined a world that was different, and we just don't work in spaces that allow for that to happen. And I'm guilty of it, certainly. I'm not saying that I'm not, but I'm saying, what would it look like if where would we end up if we allowed ourselves to do that, to think that way, you know?
No, that's a powerful question. And it actually makes me think of, I think it was Arundhati Roy, maybe at like the start of the pandemic, who wrote an article about the pandemic as a portal, and essentially an opportunity for us to think anew, to reimagine, to not go back to what was, but think about what can be. And so I'm wondering for you, as you reflect on the last year, there has been a lot of unexpected snow in April in the meta statement. But like thinking about climate change and fires on the West Coast and Pacific Northwest, police brutality and protests against that, a pandemic, recently an insurrection at the Capitol, and like there's been like, it's Twilight Zone. But I'm wondering for you, as you reflect on the last year or last 12 months, what your biggest moment of reckoning has been.
It has been like you said, I mean, drinking from a fire hose doesn't even begin to describe, I think, the sort of onslaught of things that have happened over the past year. I think certainly I, like everyone else, has been affected by the imagery that we've seen from George Floyd to, Karen in the park and stopping that man for calling the cops on him, for just asking her to leash her dog, to like you said, just all of these moments where you felt like literally my cup is just full. But I think one of the things that affected me most, and I don't know if it is a moment of reckoning, but certainly it was watching, and it's hard to use the right vocabulary, but I grew up in South Shore, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. It's on the southeast side. It's Michelle Obama's neighborhood. I love my community. I love my neighbors. Like, it was, in my mind, and a wonderful place to grow up. They used to call it the Black Gold Coast, right? And there is that neighborhood is, now it's like the top 10 for crime, and it's all of these things. But there is a chain grocery store on a main thoroughfare in Chicago called Stony Island, and it's on 71st and Stony. And this is a community that we used to have another, like, more than one chain grocery store. The other one was Dominic's when I was growing up. Now, who knows what, they went out of business all throughout Chicagoland, and almost every other neighborhood, like, got theirs replaced with the Mariano's or another grocery store. And South Shore was the last, essentially, to have its Dominic's replaced, for all the reasons, right? And it finally, and the community really wanted this grocery store, another grocery store, lots of organizing, lots of advocating, the aldermen trying to attract grocery stores and really holding the line that it shouldn't be a subpar grocery store, cut rate, or what, fill in the blank, whatever that description is, but that it should be this a high quality grocery store with produce and, like, stuff that people take for granted again. And that battle was finally won, and the new grocery store opened in the early part of 2020. So this remaining grocery store, this Jewel, following George Floyd, was like decimated, like overrun by people looting, and like there was cell phone footage of people just storming this grocery store and walking out with like boatloads of things. And I was so emotionally like overwhelmed by watching this video, watching Black people running the store, multi-generational, and seeing the inside of the store as this was happening, and like all these people like getting what they could. And now I have no emotional attachment to this grocery store, but it brought me to tears. For like so many reasons, right? Like just the desperation, right? Like that people felt the need to do this and take what they could. The fact that, you know, anger that we were even in this position, for people to feel like they're so helpless and so don't give a you know what, right? Like that I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take anything that I could. That elders who in my tradition and my family and in my culture, right, who are the standard bearers and the torch bearers were in there too, like let me get some, right? And again, this like and this feeling like if this is all this country has to, you know, offer me, I'm gonna take it. I'm just gonna take whatever I can. And knowing also this policy struggle and this advocacy and organizing story of this grocery store, this other grocery store just blocks away that literally just came to the neighborhood. And then because of what happened at the Jewel, literally the next day, watching Black people line up outside of the new grocery store, like, not today, right? Like, it's not going to happen here at this fresh market. And that whole like 48, 72 hour period, I don't know what, but that was like super emotional for me for all of the reasons, right? Because I feel like it's a manifestation of what happens in this country and in this society, right? Like we created this problem of a police officer that would put their neck on and hold it and on a Black man, right? Metaphorically, physically, all of the things. We created that. That is uniquely American. And then we wring our hands when a community responds in this way. And then as a member of that community, both racially and ethnically and culturally, but also like legitimately, that's my neighborhood, right? And like to see those things happen, it was just all a lot. And it was a reckoning of sorts in that, you know, what then is my agency and what then is my responsibility and how can I do what I can from where I sit to prevent this, whatever this is, right? If it is police reform, if it is some version of abolition or defunding, is it organizing, right? In the sense of, is it helping communities understand their own value and worth to be able to attract and leverage the kind of business and economic development, so it doesn't take forever, right, for grocery stores to see the value in a place like South Shore. is what is it that I can do on any of these levers? Which one can I pull from where I sit to ensure that nothing like this happens again? And I'm one person, but I feel like every little thing that I do in a day at least can culminate like into this vision I have of like, okay, well, what can Tawa do from my little perch, like, to this is too much. It's too much, right? Nobody should have to feel like this is their one opportunity to get what they can, because it may not come back. And it's certainly, that opportunity shouldn't present itself because a Black man died in the street, like, senselessly, right? So I don't know.
Mhm. No, you've said a lot. I was actually kind of like visually taking in South Shore and like the end of Lakeshore Drive area.
Yes.
Um, but something that you mentioned about the, like, what can you do in your agency in such a huge, I guess, cluster of
Yeah.
America, that makes me think about the, like, ancestral wisdom and like
Mm,
the soil from which you've grown.
yes.
And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about, so it's like just facts, like we come from a strong and resilient lineage, period. How would
Full
you,
stop.
yeah, full stop, with like the brakes screeching, full stop.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
how would you describe the type of ancestor that you want to be and why? Like, you've talked about your perch right now in this moment, and I'm curious, like, the generations that come after you, how would you want them to look back on your presence, the levers that you pulled, your impact, etc.?
Wow. Oh, Makia. Like, so that's really a difficult, it's a multi-layered conversation, right? Like, I have to think about my parents and my stock. Like, I'm an only child. My mother's only child, but I was raised by my mother and my father, who was my stepdad that raised me, and I have 3 stepbrothers. But because of the age differences and everything, I was raised as an only child with these very strong African-centered values. My dad was an institution builder. My mom was an institution builder, is an institution builder, and they created African-centered organizations that live to this day, and it makes me proud of their legacy, right? Like, I want to be a good example and represent them well in all that I do. And while it seems like a simple thing, I think honoring one's parents and being and being a manifestation of all that they poured into me, I think is important. And I would want to be remembered as a good daughter and someone who was proud of my legacy and proud of the sort of culture that they poured into me, right? And it's interesting that we're in this moment of racial equity, certainly in the field of philanthropy and nonprofit, where everybody is talking about anti-Black racism and things that need to be done to repair harm that's been, inflicted in this country for hundreds of years. And I had the benefit of getting those kinds of educations and lessons early on when I didn't even want them, right? When I was like, we talking about Black stuff again, like, can't we just do something else with, but I think that was a game changer for me, right? Going to an African-centered independent school until I was 8, and not knowing that people didn't learn about Marcus Garvey or learn about Sojourner Truth or learn about Queen Hatshepsut or things like that I took for granted, and like who I was and where I came from and that kind of cultural foundation. you know, it's invaluable to me, and I would want to perpetuate that if I ever have children, um, or if I, in my spirit, I just want to be that manifestation of my ancestors. And I hope that when I leave this earth, people can say that I, you know, as the Egyptians said, job well done, right? Like you have been that sort of, you have represented us well. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think I would want to, in that same spirit, you know, be of service to my community, my people, my family, just to have left that legacy of like service that I gave of my time, talent, and treasure in every single way that I could. And not in the depleted way, because sometimes we overdo it, right? And shout out to Trisha and her value of sleep and the restorative nature of sleep and all of that. But just that I was of service and that I tried to do what I could always. I don't know. And of course, I hope that people will say that I was a good friend and a good wife, in addition to being a good daughter, and all of those things too. But
awesome. So your reference to Trisha of the NAP ministry, with rest as, you know, rest being revolutionary, makes me wonder what your approach to self-care is. And if you have any rituals that you use to really survive, thrive, flourish as you are navigating life as Tawa.
Well, you know, a lot of the rituals that I had are now unavailable to me in COVID times. I love eating and drinking well, and exploring culinary scenes. I love traveling. It is so restorative to me, not just beach travel, but exploring other cultures and really immersing myself in a different environment is just a beautiful thing. And I think it builds bridges and all of the things. And, you know, those two things I cannot do right now. So I've been cooking more, which brings me great joy. Doing the dishes from said cooking does not bring me joy at all, but I have been doing more cooking and exploring more of my cocktails at home. I mean, I've always made cocktails at home, but like really like trying to experiment with new things and tips and tricks that I probably wouldn't have necessarily done if we were not in COVID times. And yeah, binge watching television, nothing really exciting like that is, you know, I don't sew, I can't crochet or knit. I don't have like, you know, those really exciting things that people do. But yeah, that's what I do. Pet my dog. I have a new dog. My dog of 12 years passed sadly in the fall of 2019. So I got a pandemic puppy like everybody else, and he's 5 months old. His shout out to Major Taylor Mitchell. But yeah, so yeah, those are the things. And of course, time with my husband, who is the greatest.
Awesome. So is there somewhere, I've been making my list of where I want to travel when it's free to move about the globe again. What's on your top, like what are the top 3 destinations as you're just like envisioning when you get free?
Well, I've always wanted to go to Thailand. So that is like that is at the top of my bucket list right now. I have 0 plans made, but I really do want to go to Thailand and just experience that. I am also Nigerian, and I like would love to go to Nigeria. I've never been. And so that would be interesting just to be there and to experience it. Like, I've had the good fortune of going to the continent of Africa and going to other countries, but I've never been to Nigeria. So that's a place that I would like to explore. But I think as soon as we're free, I'm just going to go to somebody's beach. It doesn't have to be halfway around the world. It legitimately just has to be like, wake up in the morning and by noon, I'm like on somebody's beach. Like, that is what I need in my life.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I am hoping for that for you in short.
Thank you.
That you can get to the beach. So my final question for you is about advice for other Black women who are trying to amplify their voice and become better self-advocates. What gems would you offer them on that journey?
Get you some girlfriends. I think because sometimes people see us in a way that we don't see ourselves. And I know for me, my network of girlfriends help me to be a better me, and help me to amplify my voice and, do the things and say the things and stand in ways that I wouldn't always push myself. And, if you're a great self-starter, that's wonderful. I mean, I'm motivated, right? Like, other things motivate me. But I mean, when it comes to like amplifying your own voice and being like, I can do this, sometimes you need those supportive people in your life to say, no, you really can do this. You got this. They don't know any more than you. You can do it. And sometimes if you can't be that person for yourself, have people on your team. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean like people who stand for you, to remind you of the power that you have within yourself to amplify your voice and make change.
That example, what you just said, has me visualizing Bozoma St. John and Lovey Ajayi, and how they rep for each other so hard. Like, they do that.
And I feel like I know them and I totally don't, but that's what you need. And as a matter of fact, follow them on social media, people out there, because I can't tell you, like, there was, Lovey posted something last week and she was like, have you gassed yourself up today? And she was like, look at my cheekbones, look at my, like, whatever. And she was like, I'm feeling feel yourself today. And I'm like, yes, I should. And so I feel like, even though I have never met them in my life, like, I do feel like that is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they are incredible models of that. And Bozoma St. John, she had a series called like the Badass Workshop, maybe over the summer, that I participated in. And it was just like, I'm just taking notes. I'm taking notes on this wisdom here. And so in the same spirit as Bozoma St. John and Lovey Ajayi, I think that your wisdom in this conversation, Tawa, will be very instructive and valuable to those who view it or listen to it. And so thank you so much for making the time to speak with me.
Thank you for asking me to speak with you. It's been a pleasure. And I hope that it's been worth it for someone.
I can guarantee that that's the case.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.